In episode 9, we found out what daily life was like in a world where China and Russia dominated. But now, the rubber meets the road. How does this Sino-Russian Eurasian superpower bloc tackle the big problems facing humanity today? Climate change, economic collapse, and the risk of nuclear war? To answer these questions, here are my top 3 predictions about this alternate world. No. 1. Global chaos. In our own world, most countries, even rivals, agree on one thing. Climate change is real and humans are responsible. So even though the US pulled out of the Paris Agreement, global CO2 emissions keep hitting records. However, this alternate world's version of the Paris Agreement, led by China and Russia, faces more obstacles. First, China has an industrial revolution to finish. Their coal-powered factories drive a massive emissions spike, fueling climate scientists' worst nightmares. Emissions come from everywhere. As Beijing funds megacities and infrastructure across Eurasia, Beijing has a plan to conquer pollution, but only within their sphere of influence. They want to build eco-friendly cities for developing countries, but only if those nations adopt their systems, especially Russia's. Beijing loves cheap Russian gas, but their shared climate goals don't go beyond selling Russian LNG worldwide. As for Russia, this agreement is all about keeping the cash flowing. Vladimir Putin will sell fossil fuels anywhere to fund his military and maintain his power. So with or without this agreement, there would be a lot of carbon waste. Without America's funding and technology, poorer nations can't cope with rising waters and heat waves. India suffers deadly heat waves, and Japan battles typhoons. Floods hit Bangladesh and Indonesia, sparking the largest climate migrations in history. Soon, millions are packed into refugee camps, prompting anger and violence against both China and Russia. Protests erupt in South Asia and Africa, targeting Chinese banks and construction sites. Without the US to counter China's influence, Beijing responds brutally, sending riot police and tanks to restore order. It's not just climate migrants who suffer. Pakistan struggles after catastrophic floods, and Turkey deals with devastating earthquakes. Iran offers aid, but is stretched thin. Meanwhile, Russia exploits a warming Arctic, opening new oil fields and shipping routes. That's why Russia wins. They take over the oil industry in Greenland and threaten Norway's northern territories. With China's support, they can't be challenged. Only America's absent B-52 bombers would have enough range to reach Moscow. And so this Eurasian superpower is stuck exporting more greenhouse gases to fuel the very crises it pretends to solve. Prediction number 2. Economic crisis. In our world, the pandemic and Russia's invasion of Ukraine devastated economies. Oil spiked over $100 per barrel and food rose sharply, affecting everyone, especially developing nations. But in this alternate world, China and Russia have replaced the dollar with their own currencies. China's yuan is linked to commodities and Russia's ruble to energy. While these currencies work well within the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, they aren't strong enough to replace the dollar globally. To see why, let's look at 2 key industries: oil and high-tech. China dominates rare earth metals, supplying the world's advanced chips and electric vehicles with ingredients like lithium, cobalt, and manganese. Having cut ties with the West, China uses this advantage to play hardball, supplying materials only to allied nations. This benefits China, but hurts Russia and other allies. The Kremlin needs advanced tech to modernize its military. However, when sanctions hit, Putin faces a choice: either buy expensive tech from China or develop alternatives. The same goes for oil. Russia sells gas and oil to China, which exports refined products to allied nations. However, China adds massive profit margins and limits volumes, angering European allies who face costly winters and inflation. Again, this damages the Eurasian superpower bloc. These economic strains spark discontent in many countries. Protests break out from Mongolia to Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan. Some want out of the bloc, others demand more, say, without America's support. China and Russia crack down, crushing dissent with force. Tanks roll out and dissidents disappear. Things get even worse when China's crackdown on Xinjiang cotton sparks boycotts. Western brands leave and production moves elsewhere, raising clothing costs worldwide. The US, though fragmented, takes advantage of this crisis. Local currencies might be worthless abroad, but they're perfect for trade within the country. This means the US can export more and import less, saving their dwindling reserves for essentials like food. In fact, the US becomes a regional hub for Asian manufacturers seeking to diversify supply chains. Despite being politically isolated, the US retains its economic might. Although global trade weakens, American entrepreneurs and farmers feed their neighbors, filling the void left by China and Russia. Because the world is shifting away from the euro and the pound, the US dollar becomes the default currency. As money flows into local currencies, the US government becomes the biggest borrower. With American treasuries becoming safer than ever, investors pile in, increasing the dollar's value and strengthening the US economy. So, as this alternate world sinks deeper into recession, the US experiences modest growth, boosting the economy and easing inflation. Sure, their politics are still fractured, but the dollar's range shows the US is still an economic powerhouse. The Eurasian superpower may dominate trade, but it's riddled with inequality. Wealthy states like Saudi Arabia and Israel profit from arms sales to the bloc's poorer members, worsening disparities and sparking internal conflicts. And all the while, Iranian oil revenues fund a growing military, giving them leverage but straining relations with China and Russia. After all, Iran demands respect and power despite being weaker. Tensions flare as Israel and Saudi Arabia grow closer, forming a counterweight to Iran. This annoys China and Russia, who back Iran. If Israel and Riyadh join forces, it could challenge the entire Eurasian superpower bloc. And that's why the world is getting crazier. The US might be economically adrift, but its military remains unmatched, politically isolated. Washington still commands the seas with aircraft carriers and battleships. China and Russia haven't matched this capability yet. Why spend trillions on blue water navies when their focus is Asia? This absence leaves the seas vulnerable to piracy and smuggling. Gangs run rampant in the Pacific and Indian Oceans, looting ships and disrupting trade. As governments struggle, organized crime groups thrive. With porous borders and weak policing, criminals smuggle people, drugs, and weapons across regions. Lawlessness hits hardest in areas controlled by China and Russia, hurting their reputation and profits. Add to that the sanctions relief that every nation wants, and you've got a recipe for disaster. The Eurasian superpower bloc doesn't have the diplomatic heft to broker deals, leaving negotiations to the UN, which lacks enforcement power. And as tensions grow, rivalries boil over, conflicts over disputed islands, and borders go from bad to worse. Border clashes between China and India turn violent. Japan accuses Russia of pirating in the Pacific. Iran supports Houthi attacks on international shipping. The result is chaos. Global trade plummets as insurance costs skyrocket and ports become battlegrounds. And no, 3. Nuclear nightmare. Imagine our world without the US's push for non-proliferation. Our timeline's Iran has 100 atomic bombs. That's a lot. But in this alternate world, Saudi Arabia has developed their own nuclear weapons. Israel fears falling behind, so they work overtime to beat Iran and Saudi Arabia to the punch. Both sides prepare for strikes, raising the stakes dramatically. China and Russia stop short of condemning Israel, fearing losing a valuable ally, but they don't offer much support either, hoping the crisis passes. For Iran, the split is a wake-up call. Alone in the face of a nuclear Saudi-Israeli alliance, Tehran considers their options. Should they launch first? It's a risky gamble. Iran's nuclear arsenal is smaller, but its location is perfect for surprise attacks. What's more, America's anti-missile shield in Poland and Romania isn't active yet, but such a move would unite the world against them, isolating Iran further and risking all-out war. That's why Iran plays it safe. They issue threats, but make no moves. Instead, they use their missiles as bargaining chips, demanding concessions from both sides. Israel won't negotiate. They'll strike once they're ready. But as the standoff drags on, they face political pressure. The Arab world turns against them, blaming Israel for upsetting the region's balance. Even China and Russia criticize Israel, urging restraint. But as protests mount, Israeli leaders dig in. They see a window to destroy Iran's program and consolidate their dominance. Finally, Israel strikes. Iran deploys its missile defenses, but some get through, causing major damage. Within hours, Iranian missiles rain down on Israel, but most are in. Iran's arsenal is smaller and less advanced, lacking long-range options. Still, casualties are heavy. Israeli cities burn and Tel Aviv is in ruins. Israel's dream of dominating the Middle East turns into a nightmare. Iran's fighters are ready to retaliate against any ground assault. Israeli casualties are too high to risk a ground war, so Israel's forced to pull back. China and Russia condemn the attack and push for talks, but neither side trusts the other. Iran blames Israel for the chaos and refuses to disarm. Israel demands full concessions and won't accept anything less. As peace seems impossible, China and Russia seek advantages. Beijing boosts defense ties with Saudi Arabia, and Moscow strengthens links with Egypt. The US proposes mediation, but everyone rejects it, eager to win alone. Years pass with no end in sight, and so the world changes. The economic burden of the arms races crushes all but the superpowers. Trade plummets and investment dries up. The nuclear threat keeps analysts awake, but it also creates opportunities. Arms dealers and private armies thrive. Mercenaries secure shipping lanes, and private jets fly armed convoys. The world is trapped in a cycle of fear and spending with no end in sight, and that's our world on the brink. The world of this alternate history is dominated by China and Russia, but it's not stable. Climate change, economic inequality, and nuclear dangers threaten to tear it apart. Will it collapse, or can it find a way to survive? We'll find out next time when we dive into the conflicts shaping this altered reality. Thanks for coming along on this journey through time and alternate histories. If you've enjoyed this episode, show your support. Your engagement helps bring these historical tales to more viewers.